Hey there everyone, the Video Game Cabinet here tonight doing a review on Dragon Quest VI for the Nintendo DS. I just spent the last 2.5 weeks or so knocking this one out. Dragon Quest VI on the DS is, to my understanding, a very faithful port slash update of the Super Famicom version that we never received here in the United States back in 1995. The story here revolves around the protagonist discovering that he is living in a dream world that is existing parallel to the real world. The idea of a dream world intertwining with the real world seems a little bit interesting at first, but the game doesn't really do much with the concept, in my opinion. Certain key locations in both worlds are nearly identical, so sometimes exploring the two globes can feel a bit samey. The concept of a dream world, real world, and the other concepts in this game, Dragon Quest VI, are not nearly as interesting as the themes explored in previous Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest games, which were all about family and connected generations. Not so much here. The plot in Dragon Quest VI starts off semi-focused with your party exploring both worlds to find and defeat the villain Murdaugh. But after the first 12 hours or so, the main plot is practically dropped, and you just go on a bunch of random side adventures that have nothing to do with any central narrative. Some side adventures are better than others. For instance, I did like the one in Castle Swanstone where there's a princess trapped in a mirror, and you have to travel to a nearby location in the dream world to get her out in the real world. But much of the time, the story can get a bit boring with its slow pace and meandering nature. There are long stretches where nothing much happens except inconsequential events with NPCs at various towns. Towards the end, a new main antagonist, Mortimer, threatens the two worlds, and this gives some last-minute focus to the story, but it's too little too late. The previous Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest games meandered a little bit with side quests here and there, but not nearly as much as Dragon Quest VI. I really wish the game focused more on a central narrative, especially after how well Dragon Warrior 4 and Dragon Quest V established the lore for the Zenithian trilogy. Part 4 and 5 connected to each other so well that I can't help but being dissatisfied with how little Dragon Quest VI references them. There's a floating castle from 4 and 5 that makes a return here, and that was the only major connection that I noticed. I also did not care very much about any of the main characters here. None of them were very memorable or had much personality. Therefore, I did not care when they were celebrating victory at the end of the game. I didn't even care much about the extra chatter during the party chat feature, which was added into this DS version from the Super Famicom version. This was a stark contrast to how I felt about the wonderful cast of characters in 4 and 5, which both had some of my favorite characters in any RPG ever. And by the way, I loved using the party chat in Dragon Quest V, but here in Dragon Quest VI, the extra party chat just didn't really do much for me. Like I said, I just didn't care much about the characters. I still clicked on it to hear what they said, but, very, very not memorable. The characters in Dragon Quest VI also did not seem to have any lineage stemming from the generations in previous games. And I also found this a little disappointing. In the other games, Dragon Warrior 1, 2, and 3, it's the different generations, descendants from originally the character in 3 and Part 2 has descendants from Part 1. And in Dragon Quest V, the characters are the descendants from the characters in Dragon Warrior 4. So, I was expecting the descendants in 6 to come from 4 and 5, but, they're totally unrelated, and I found that a little bit disappointing, personally. Despite my indifference towards the story and characters, the gameplay was just as solid as ever for the series. The class system from Dragon Warrior 3 is expanded here with the vocation system. Level grinding and mastering the multiple vocations for each character was very engrossing, especially when preparing for the very challenging final boss, Mortimer. And even though some of the main towns in the two worlds are relatively similar, it's still fun to explore both globes to discover new modes of travel, such as the flying carpet, the flying bed in the dream world, and using the harp to submerge your ship underwater and explore the ocean floor. The soundtrack is also worth mentioning in that it has some nice tunes, especially the palace theme. However, I must say that there were too few tracks for a game of this size. I felt like I kept on hearing some of the same several tracks over and over. So, nice music, but it could have used a little bit more tracks thrown in there. This game took me about 49 hours to be exact, and yeah, so it was pretty sizable. So, in conclusion, the gameplay of Dragon Quest VI was solid, but I just wish I cared more about the characters and story here. It's an okay game in the end, but it is unfortunately a noticeable step down from the standards set by previous entries in the series. So I'm going to give Dragon Quest VI a 6.5 out of 10. That's my review. It's all right. It's okay. Some things about it, are pretty solid. The gameplay, I did like the music. It's just I wish there was more of it. But there's plenty of locales to explore. Like some of them are the same in both worlds, but others are different. Other things are kind of cool. But I'd say, at the beginning of the game, like I said, there's a little bit of focus on a main plot. It's not the plot, though. At the beginning, it's not as interesting as the stories told in the first 5 games, especially Dragon Quest V. That 5 had just one of the most amazing stories I've ever seen, and like going from that to this really was a bit disappointing. Like I said, it's still okay overall, but like, the first one, Dragon Warrior 1, I gave that an 8. That was a really good start to the series. Dragon Warrior 2 and 3, I gave those 9s. Those were great. Those really started leveling up the series. And Dragon Warrior 4 and 5, Dragon Quest 5, those 2 games I give a perfect 10 out of 10, especially Dragon Quest V. That just, like I said, that is absolutely one of my tip-top favorite games ever made. And the characters were so memorable in that one. And, I just kept on wanting to hear the party chat, and it really enriched the experience for me, But the party chat option in here, I clicked on it, but I mean, I don't know. I just didn't care about the characters or the story, what was going on in here. And, the real world and dream world idea, it was like, it was all right. But, like I said, the previous 5 games, they were all about family and connected generations, especially part 5. That was all about family. But to some degree, all 5 of the first games were a little bit about family and a lot about, descending generations. And this part 6 just forgets all of that. So, I can't help but being disappointed. It's still an okay game. It's not a bad game at all, but like, some things about it were a bit meh, and other things about it were solid. And I did have a lot of... I did have some good fun right at the end when I was leveling up to beat the final boss. He gave me a good challenge, and that kind of enriched my appreciation for the vocation system and leveling up my characters and giving me a good challenge at the end. But, you know, when I was watching the ending scene after the final boss, you know, all the heroes are having this party at this castle, and one of the girls, I forget her name, like she starts kind of disappearing into the dream world. Ashlyn, that's her name. She starts kind of disappearing into the dream world, and she's like, you know, don't forget me, whatever. Like, and you're supposed to kind of care, but I didn't, you know? So, I don't know. Hopefully the series gets back on track after this. Now I guess I got to play Dragon Warrior 7 on the PlayStation 1, and then eventually it goes back to being called Dragon Quest with part 8 and 9 and 10 is online, so I'm never going to play that. And then 11 on the PS4. Eventually I'll have to play these. So anyways, that's my review of Dragon Quest VI. I'm glad it's done. It's off the backlog and back on the shelf. So that's it. 6.5 for Dragon Quest VI. And have a good night.